The sun was blazing down on the streets of Los Angeles, turning the movie set into an oven. It was just another Tuesday, or at least that is how it was supposed to start. The location was buzzing with energy. Huge lights were set up everywhere, cables snaked across the ground like snakes, and hundreds of crew members were rushing back and forth, making sure everything was perfect. They were filming a big action movie, and everyone knew that the stakes were high. But the most important person on the set was Keanu Reeves. He was the heart of the film, the man everyone was there to see. Keanu is known all over the world for doing his own stunts. He doesn't like to sit in a comfortable chair while a double does the hard work. He wants to feel the impact, to understand the movement, and to give the audience something real. On this specific day, the schedule was packed. They were trying to shoot a complicated scene that involved running, jumping, and fighting. It was the kind of scene that looks easy on screen but takes hours to set up and requires immense physical energy to perform. From the moment Keanu stepped out of his trailer, the crew noticed he looked different. Usually he is the first one to smile, the first one to thank a lighting technician or a caterer. He is famous for being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. But today his face was serious. He looked pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing a heavy leather jacket for the scene, even though the temperature was rising. As the day went on, the sweat on his forehead wasn't just from the heat. He looked exhausted. Despite this, Keanu didn't complain. He walked through the choreography with the stunt team, listening carefully to the instructions. He practiced the movements again and again. The stunt coordinator, a tough man who had seen it all, kept looking at Keanu with worried eyes. He asked Keanu if he wanted to take a break, maybe take a nap or drink some water. Keanu just shook his head, tapped his chest, and said he was good to go. He wanted to get the shot. He didn't want to waste the crew's time or the studio's money. That is just who he is, a total professional who puts the work first. The director called for quiet. "Action!" he yelled. The scene began. Keanu started running. He was sprinting down the alleyway, his boots hitting the pavement hard. The cameras followed him, capturing the speed and intensity. He had to dodge a swinging prop and then slide under a closing gate. He did it perfectly. On the monitor, it looked incredible. He was fast, focused, and powerful. He looked like the action hero everyone loves. For the first few takes, everything went fine. But as they started shooting the fifth take of the day, the heat and the fatigue started to catch up with him. The alleyway was narrow, and the air was thick with dust. Keanu finished his run and was supposed to confront two attackers on a flight of stairs. He reached the top of the stairs, raised his prop weapon, and prepared to deliver the final blow for the take. Suddenly, his pace slowed down. It wasn't a dramatic slowdown like in a movie where the music swells. It was a clumsy, heavy stop. He seemed to lose his balance. His legs, which had been carrying him so smoothly just seconds before, gave way. He didn't fall like an actor trying to make a fall look cool. He fell like a bag of wet cement. He crumpled onto the concrete steps, dropping the prop. For a split second, nobody moved. The entire crew held their breath. In the movie business, when someone falls, everyone usually waits for the director to yell "cut" to see if the actor stays in character. But this silence felt different. It was scary. Keanu wasn't moving. He was lying on his side, curled up slightly, and he wasn't getting up. "Cut." The director screamed, but his voice wasn't the authoritative voice he usually used. It was high-pitched and full of panic. "Cut, is he okay?" That broke the spell. The quiet set exploded into noise. The stuntmen, who were just standing a few feet away, dropped their roles and rushed to him. The medic, who was always on set for emergencies, sprinted up the stairs. People from the camera crew and the lighting team abandoned their equipment to see what was happening. When they reached Keanu, he was awake but looked dazed. His eyes were glazed over, and he was breathing heavily, trying to gasp for air. He looked pale, far too pale. The medic immediately started checking his pulse and asking him questions. Keanu tried to answer, but his voice was weak and shaky. He tried to sit up, waving his hand as if to say, "I'm fine." "Let's go again," but the medic gently pushed him back down. "Don't move," the medic said firmly. The atmosphere on the set shifted completely. Just moments ago, it was a place of make-believe and excitement. Now it felt frighteningly real. The fear was visible on everyone's faces. The actors who were playing the bad guys stood by helplessly, looking down at the man they were supposed to be fighting. You could see the genuine concern in their eyes. This wasn't a scene. This was their friend, their colleague, and he was in trouble. The assistant director grabbed his walkie-talkie and made a call that no one ever wants to make. "We need an ambulance at Video Village right now. Actor down. It's serious." Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens could be heard cutting through the LA traffic. As the paramedics arrived, the crew parted like the Red Sea to let them through. They worked quickly and efficiently. They put a neck brace on Keanu just to be safe and lifted him onto a stretcher. He looked small and vulnerable lying there, stripped of his movie star aura. He just looked like a tired man who had pushed his body too far. Keanu's co-stars, who had been watching from the sidelines, rushed over. They looked horrified. Seeing the invincible action hero in such a fragile state was a shock to the system. It was a stark reminder that no matter how tough someone looks in the movies, they are human beings with limits. One of his co-stars held his hand as they wheeled him toward the ambulance. Keanu gave a weak thumbs up to the crew, trying to reassure them, but it didn't stop the heavy feeling in the air. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped away, the set fell into a strange silence. Hundreds of people stood around, looking at the empty stairs where Keanu had fallen. No one knew what to say. The director stood by the monitor, looking at the footage they had just shot. It showed Keanu running, strong and powerful. It was a painful contrast to the image of him being carried away on a stretcher. People started putting down their equipment, but their hearts weren't in it anymore. The mood was somber. Whispers started spreading through the crowd. Was it his heart? Did he hit his head? Is he going to be okay? Nobody had answers. All they knew was that production was halted indefinitely. The biggest star on the planet had just been rushed to the hospital, and for the first time in a long time, the ending of this story was uncertain. Everyone just stood there, waiting, hoping, and praying for their friend. The ride to the hospital must have felt like the longest journey of Keanu Reeves' life, even though it was only a few miles. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics were doing their job, checking vitals and talking into their radios, trying to keep the atmosphere calm. But outside, on the streets of Los Angeles, the world was still turning. People were driving to coffee shops, walking their dogs, and checking their phones. They had no idea that the man known as the One was fighting a battle of his own. Just a few blocks away, it started with a single whisper. A bystander near the movie set had seen the ambulance speed away with its lights flashing. They didn't know for sure who was inside, but they knew a major production had stopped cold. They pulled out their phone and posted a blurry photo of the street, captioning it with something vague like, "Something huge happened at the Keanu Reeves set." Ambulances everywhere. That was all it took? In the modern world, news travels faster than sound. Within minutes, that single post was picked up by entertainment accounts. Then the local news got wind of it. Suddenly, the rumor wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a shout across the internet. The hashtag pray for Keanu began to trend, not just in Los Angeles, but all over the world. People love Keanu Reeves. He isn't just an actor to them. He is a symbol of kindness in a harsh industry. Hearing that he was hurt was like hearing that a favorite uncle had fallen ill. As the news spread, the feeling of panic began to set in. Fans logged onto Twitter and Instagram, desperate for updates. Is he okay? What happened? Please tell me this is a joke. The comments sections on every celebrity news site flooded with messages of support. People shared their favorite photos of him, ones where he is smiling on a red carpet, or eating a sandwich on a park bench, or surprising fans with gifts. It was a digital vigil, millions of people holding their breath together, but along with the love came the fear. When there is no information, people start to guess. And on the internet, guessing can turn into a scary game of telephone. Some people claimed he had suffered a heart attack on set. Others said he had fallen from a building and broken his back. Tabloids, desperate for clicks, started publishing wild headlines without checking facts. Every few minutes, a new rumor popped up, each one more terrifying than the last. It was overwhelming for the fans. They didn't know what to believe. Was he in danger? Was it just a scratch? The silence from his team was deafening. Meanwhile, the situation outside the hospital was turning into a circus. The location where the ambulance had arrived was quickly discovered. Paparazzi, photographers, and news trucks descended on the medical center like a swarm of locusts. They set up their cameras on the sidewalk, hoping to get a shot of a grieving family member or a doctor entering the building. The flashing lights of the cameras created a strange, strobe-like effect against the hospital walls as the sun began to set. It was chaotic and noisy, a stark contrast to the quiet, healing environment that a hospital is supposed to be. However, not everyone outside was there to exploit the situation. Within an hour, a small group of fans had gathered too. They weren't holding cameras. They were holding flowers. Some brought hand-drawn signs that read, "Get well soon, Keanu," or "We love you." They stood quietly at a distance, watching the doors with worried eyes. When a news helicopter started circling loudly overhead, buzzing the area and disrupting the peace, the fans actually started booing. They were angry that the privacy of their hero was being invaded. It was a touching moment that showed the genuine respect people have for him. Even in the middle of a media frenzy, his fans were trying to protect him. Inside the hospital walls, the scene was completely different. The chaos of the outside world couldn't penetrate the sterile, white hallways where Keanu was being treated. There was a hushed tension in the air. Doctors and nurses moved with purpose, focused only on the patient. In a private waiting area near the emergency room, a small group of people sat huddled together. These weren't strangers on the internet. They were the people who actually knew him. His team had arrived shortly after the ambulance. They looked stressed. People were making phone calls, their voices low and urgent, trying to coordinate with the movie studio and the family. But the most emotional moments came when his friends from the industry started to arrive. You didn't see them posing for cameras or talking to the press. They slipped in through side entrances, wearing hats and sunglasses to hide their faces. But they couldn't hide the worry. One of his close co-stars, a big action star in his own right, walked into the waiting room. He looked like he had run all the way from his car. His face, usually so confident and tough, was pale with concern. He didn't say hello to the nurses or look at his phone. He just marched up to Keanu's team and asked, "Is he stable?" When he got the answer, you could see his shoulders drop a little, but the worry didn't leave his eyes. He sat down in a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. It was a raw, human image that reminded everyone that celebrities are just friends, looking out for each other when things go wrong. Time seemed to move very slowly in that waiting room. Every minute felt like an hour. There was no news coming from the examination room, which is the hardest part of any medical emergency. The not knowing, the waiting. It allows the mind to wander to the worst-case scenarios. The people in that room knew Keanu as a warrior, a guy who could take a punch and get back up. But this wasn't a movie script. There was no director to yell cut and fix the scene. This was real life, and it was scary. While the friends waited inside, the speculation outside reached a fever pitch. The internet was practically screaming for information. Major news networks interrupted their regular broadcasts to report that the actor was hospitalized. Breaking news banners flashed across screens. Analysts were brought in to discuss his grueling schedule and the dangers of stunt work. Everyone had an opinion, but nobody had the truth. The gap between what the public thought was happening and what was actually happening behind those closed doors was massive. The hospital staff had to increase security to keep the reporters from getting too close to the private wards. It was a strange battle. The press wanted a story, a headline, a picture. The people inside just wanted their friend to be okay. The noise of the helicopters and the chatter of the news anchors felt very far away to the people sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs. For them, the world had shrunk down to the sound of a heartbeat monitor and the hope that the next doctor to walk through the doors would bring good news. As the night deepened, the crowd outside thinned out a little, but the loyal fans stayed, keeping a candlelight vigil. The reporters, tired but determined, stayed too, their lenses pointed at the hospital entrance like weapons. Everyone was waiting for the same thing. A signal, a statement, anything to tell them that the man who had entertained them for decades was going to be all right. The city of Los Angeles held its breath, suspended in a moment of collective anxiety, hoping that the nightmare would end and the sun would rise on better news. The silence from the hospital was heavy, but the love from the world was loud, proving just how much one humble actor truly meant to everyone. The silence inside the hospital waiting room was getting heavier by the minute. It was that awful, suffocating kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the lights and the ticking of a clock on the wall. Keanu's closest friends and team members sat huddled together, looking like they hadn't slept in days. Every time a nurse walked past, their heads snapped up, hoping for news. But the nurses just kept walking, focused on their charts, giving nothing away. It was a test of patience, and everyone was failing it. Outside, the sun had started to come up, casting a pale morning light over Los Angeles. The crowd of fans had grown, not smaller, even though it was a workday. People were holding coffees, standing in shifts, just to be there. The reporters were still there too, looking tired and disheveled, microphones in hand, waiting for a scoop. The tension wasn't just in the hospital. It was hanging over the whole city. Everyone felt like they were holding their breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Finally, the door to the private consultation wing opened. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. He looked serious, his face grim, but he didn't look devastated. He was Keanu's longtime publicist, a man who had handled crises before, but never one that felt this personal. As he walked toward the gaggle of reporters who were being held back by hospital security, a ripple of energy went through the crowd. The camera lenses zoomed in. The fans stopped talking. The publicist held up a hand to quiet everyone down. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The silence fell instantly. He pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket and adjusted his glasses. He took a deep breath before he started speaking. You could tell he was choosing his words carefully, knowing that the entire world was hanging on every syllable. I have a statement regarding Keanu Reeves, he began, his voice steady but tired. I want to start by thanking everyone for their outpouring of love and support. Keanu is aware of the messages, and he is incredibly touched. He paused for a moment, looking at the sea of cameras. I can confirm that Keanu was admitted to the hospital yesterday afternoon following an incident on set. However, I want to clarify the rumors that have been circulating online. The reports of a heart attack or a life-threatening collapse are completely false. I repeat, they are false. A collective sigh seemed to wash over the crowd. It was a physical release of tension. The reporters scrambled to write down the correction. The fans, listening to live feeds on their phones, started to cry tears of relief. The publicist continued, explaining the real situation. He told them that Keanu had been suffering from severe physical exhaustion and extreme dehydration. He explained that the actor had been pushing himself incredibly hard for months, training for the film and performing intense stunts day after day without enough rest. On top of that, a minor injury he had sustained a few days prior, a deep muscle bruise from a fall, had been bothering him. But he had ignored it. The combination of the heat, the heavy stunt gear, the lack of sleep, and the pain from the untreated injury had simply caused his body to shut down. It wasn't a disease. It wasn't a tragedy. It was his body saying enough. The publicist explained that Keanu had fainted due to dehydration and exhaustion, hit his head slightly when he fell, which added to the scare. But the tests showed no serious damage. He was being kept overnight for observation, strictly as a precaution. He is currently resting comfortably, the publicist added, a small smile finally touching his lips. He is stable, he is awake, and he is already asking when he can go back to work. The mood shifted instantly. The fear that had gripped the city evaporated, replaced by a warm wave of affection. People online started sharing memes of Keanu drinking water or taking a nap, celebrating the fact that he was okay. The headlines changed from tragedy to exhausted hero resting. It was a massive turnaround. The truth was boring compared to the rumors, but it was the best news they could have hoped for inside the hospital room. The atmosphere was much calmer now that the word was out. Keanu was lying in a standard hospital bed, wearing a light blue gown. He looked tired, very tired, but he looked like himself again. The color was coming back to his cheeks. He had an 4-line in his arm, pumping fluids into his system to rehydrate him, and he was connected to a monitor that beeped softly in the corner. His close friends were allowed in to see him one by one. It wasn't a sad reunion. It was more like a reality check. When his co-star walked in, Keanu actually smiled, that famous crooked smile that everyone loves. He tried to sit up, but his friend rushed over and pushed him back down gently. "Don't you dare move," the friend said, laughing but sounding serious. "You scared the life out of me, man." Keanu laughed a little, his voice raspy. "I'm sorry," he said. I just wanted to get the shot right. I didn't mean to cause such a scene. That was so like him." Even lying in a hospital bed, he was apologizing for worrying people. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the crew, the production schedule, and the fans. The doctors had come in earlier and scolded him, albeit gently. They told him that he isn't made of steel, even if his characters are. They explained that exhaustion is real and dangerous. They told him he got lucky this time. Next time, his body might not give him a warning like a fainting spell. It could be much worse. Keanu listened to them intently. He isn't a stubborn man. He's just a dedicated one. He nodded and promised he would take the recovery seriously. He knew he had pushed the limit. He felt foolish, putting his health at risk for a movie, but he also felt incredibly grateful. Grateful that it wasn't worse. Grateful that he was going to be okay. As the day went on, the feeling in the room became lighter. The heavy, scary energy was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. Keanu spent some time talking to his sister on the phone, reassuring her that he was fine. He looked out the window at the city below, watching the cars drive by. He knew that out there, millions of people were relieved. The statement from the publicist had done more than just give facts. It had humanized the situation. It reminded everyone that Keanu Reeves, the man who dodges bullets and fights agents in movies, is actually just a human being. He gets tired. He gets thirsty. He hurts. And sometimes, even the strongest people need to stop and take a break. What we know so far had changed from a mystery to a simple lesson: take care of yourself. Because even the heroes we admire need a day off to rest. By the time evening came, the doctors were pleased with his progress. His fluids were up, his heart rate was normal, and the dizziness had passed. He was ordered to stay one more night just to be absolutely sure, but the crisis was officially over. The panic had turned into a story of survival and recovery. The world could finally sleep easy, knowing that their favorite actor was safe, sound, and finally getting some well-deserved rest. The morning sun was shining brightly over Los Angeles, casting a warm glow on the city that had been holding its breath for days. It was the day Keanu Reeves was scheduled to be released from the hospital, and the anticipation outside the medical center was building up again. However, the mood was completely different from the panic of a few days ago. The heavy cloud of fear had lifted, replaced by a buzz of excitement and relief. The crowd that had gathered wasn't there to chase a tragedy. They were there to celebrate a victory. They were there to welcome their hero home. Inside the private room, Keanu was getting ready to leave. He was dressed simply in a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and his favorite leather jacket. He looked a lot better than he did when he was carried in on a stretcher, but you could still see the lingering tiredness in his eyes. He moved a bit slower, taking his time to gather his things. There was no rush anymore. The doctors had given him strict instructions before signing the discharge papers: rest, hydrate, and absolutely no stunts for at least a few weeks. They told him that his body needed time to repair itself, that he couldn't just power through this one with sheer willpower. Keanu nodded and thanked them sincerely. He knew he had been lucky. He knew that if he hadn't been surrounded by such a quick-thinking crew and top-notch medical professionals, things could have gone very differently. He packed his small bag, taking a last look around the sterile room that had been his world for the past 48 hours. He was ready to leave the beeping monitors and the antiseptic smell behind. As he walked out of the hospital entrance, the sound of the crowd hit him. It wasn't a roar of anger. It was a wave of cheers and applause. Dozens of fans held up signs, some reading, "Welcome back, Keanu," and others saying, "Take your time." The flashbulbs from the cameras went off like crazy, creating a strobe light effect, but Keanu didn't look annoyed. He stopped on the top step of the entrance. He looked at the faces of the people who had spent their days and nights waiting there just to catch a glimpse of him. He didn't say anything into the microphones that were shoved in his face. He just stood there, taking it all in. A genuine, warm smile spread across his face. He raised a hand and offered a peace sign, a simple gesture that he is famous for. It was his way of saying, "I'm okay and thank you." He even pointed to a few of the fans holding homemade signs, acknowledging them personally. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to the people standing there. It proved that despite the chaos of fame, he still sees the people who support him. He then got into the waiting black SUV, and as the door closed, the crowd cheered one last time. The drive home was quiet and peaceful. Leaving the chaotic noise of the hospital and the reporters behind, the car navigated the streets of LA until it reached the privacy of his residence. Stepping out of the car and onto his own property felt like a massive weight being lifted off his shoulders. This was his sanctuary. This was where the real world couldn't touch him. The first thing Keanu did wasn't check his phone or call his agent. He simply walked into his living room, sat down on his comfortable couch, and let out a long, deep breath. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about scripts, fight choreography, or hitting his marks. He was just existing. It felt strange to be still, but it also felt necessary. His dogs, happy to see him, bounded over, tails wagging wildly. He petted them, feeling the simple, grounding joy of their presence. It was the kind of medicine no doctor could prescribe. Meanwhile, the movie set was a ghost town. The studio had officially announced that production was pausing for 2 weeks to allow their star to recover. This was a huge deal. Halting a major film costs millions of dollars a day. Every minute the cameras aren't rolling, money is being lost. But surprisingly, there was no anger from the studio executives. Instead, they released a statement supporting Keanu completely. They emphasized that the health and safety of the cast and crew were the top priority. They even shut down rumors about recasting or rewriting the script to write him out. They were willing to wait for him. This sent a powerful message to the industry and the fans. It showed that Keanu Reeves isn't just an actor. He is the heart of the project. You can't just replace him. It was a testament to the respect he commands in Hollywood. Usually the business is cold and calculating, but this was a moment of humanity. The crew, while upset about the temporary loss of work, were also relieved. They knew that when they came back, they would be working with a leader who was rested and ready, not a man running on fumes. Over the next few days, Keanu settled into a routine of recovery. He spent his time reading, listening to music, and sleeping a lot. He let his body heal the only way it knows how, by doing nothing. He spoke on the phone with his co-stars who called to check in on him, not to talk about work. They talked about life, about hobbies, and about how grateful they were that he was okay. It strengthened the bonds between them. The shared scare had made them more than just colleagues. It made them a family. During this quiet time, Keanu also took a moment to reflect on the craziness of the past week. He sat down with his laptop and scrolled through some of the fan posts. He saw the fan art, the videos, and the millions of messages from strangers wishing him well. He read stories from people who said his movies had helped them through dark times and how they were praying for him now. It was overwhelming. He realized that he isn't just making movies. He is touching lives. The thought of so many people caring about him brought a tear to his eye. It humbled him. He knew that he owed it to them and to himself to take better care of his health from now on. He couldn't be the hero for everyone else if he didn't take care of himself first. As the 2-week mark approached, the conversation started to shift toward the future. The doctors gave him the green light to return to light activity, though he was still advised to take it easy with the stunts. The excitement started to build again. The media wasn't asking about his health anymore. They were asking, when is he coming back? The narrative had changed from a tragedy to a comeback. The story of his hospitalization became a reminder to everyone that we are all human, even the people we put on pedestals, the ones who seem invincible on the big screen, have limits. The fear of losing him made people appreciate him more. It made people realize that kindness and humility are rare qualities, and we should protect the people who embody them while we have them. On the eve of his return to the set, Keanu stood on his balcony, looking out at the lights of Los Angeles. He took a deep breath of the cool night air. He felt strong. He felt rested. He felt like himself again. He knew that when he walked back onto that set, the energy would be electric. The crew would be happy, the fans would be watching, and he would be ready to give it his all just this time, with a water bottle always nearby and a much better understanding of when to say cut. The chapter of the sudden hospitalization was closed. It was a scary few days filled with uncertainty, but it ended with the best possible outcome. The good guy was okay. And as the city slept, waiting for the next day, the world felt a little brighter knowing that Keanu Reeves was still out there, recovering, smiling, and getting ready to entertain us all once again.